Hello everyone, welcome back to the Book of Mormon Allegory channel. I'm going to be your host today. We're going to be talking a little more about current timeline events, things that are happening like in the next month. Hopefully it'll be a little faster pace and a shorter video. First, a disclaimer, I am fairly clueless when it comes to these things. I'm just trying to do my best and understand the signs of the times, but a lot of times I get them wrong, and bear with me as I'm learning with you. And let's go. So one of those things was a prediction about the election. I guess I was wrong. Biden apparently did win. It's kind of sad for me, but all the lawsuits that Trump is coming out with have failed. Even the big Texas lawsuit that the Supreme Court has. I guess this whole Ezra's Eagle prophecy was wrong, and it's back to the drawing board. Well, no, not so quick. Trump winning has been prophesied from thousands of years ago, and nothing anyone can do or say is going to change that. This is exactly what God's about. It has that, divine flavor, that fourth watch, Hail Mary, impossible comeback kind of feel that God is so proficient at. This is a lesson he's trying to teach us over and over, because we are going to be up against impossible odds in the last days with the Antichrist. We will be like, the Jews in Jerusalem with Sennacherib and the whole host of Assyria at our gates waiting to just destroy us. And escape and salvation will look utterly impossible. We will need, to draw on our faith built by experience, gained from seeing God's deliverance in our own lives, and from examples in our scriptural record, some of which are the classic disciples on the sea. Christ came in the last watch, the fourth watch, 11th hour. Nephi had to have 3 attempts to get the plates. The Nephites' deliverance with their belief in Christ, the very night that his sign was given, they were about to be killed. And this is how God works. Lot at Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham with the priest of Pharaoh, his subsequent sparing of Isaac as his knife was raised. This is classic God. This situation that we are currently in. The Super Bowl. I don't know why, but I keep drawing back on the Super Bowl. It had 2 separate witnesses. The Indian chief, who said that after the Chiefs win, we'll be down to weeks and maybe just a couple of months before life as we know it would end and the end times would begin. Man, has that happened. Holy cow, with COVID happening a few months later, life as we knew it has totally ended. The Super Bowl, if you don't remember, was basically a national sermon on a Sunday taught through football. The Chiefs were out of the land of Zion, the New Jerusalem. San Francisco 49ers were out of San Francisco, the homosexual flagship of America. It's basically Sodom and Gomorrah versus New Jerusalem. And it came down to the last minutes. If you remember, they were evenly matched up until halftime. Halftime, Satan really put on a show. That was kind of crazy, I heard. And then in the last 7 minutes, or 6 minutes, Mahomes for Kansas City made 3 touchdowns, and then they finished off with an interception. They just totally trounced them 31-20. This is what our God is all about. He is a come from behind, fourth quarter, fourth watch, underdog team kind of God. And this is the situation we are in. It's going to have the same result here. You're going to have the proud, represented by Sherman here, saying he's the best corner in the game, with his face in the mud, right at the, the goal line as Christ's team crosses just in the nick of time. This is what he's preparing us for. So, is Trump's winning actually prophesied? Is Ezra's Eagle correct? Well, if you know the prophecy, you're thinking to yourself right now, either it's misunderstood, it's false, or we're about to see the biggest political reversal in American history. I think it's the latter. It's already proven precisely correct. It identified Hoover as the first to be set up on the left wing with his ties to Council of Foreign Relations and secret combinations. It identified FDR as the second feather, being twice as long, who is known to have appointed hundreds of communists to his administration, according to some reports. It identified the two feathers, middle time approaching, which would be JFK and Nixon, as being short, either through assassination or impeachment, resignation. And it correctly identified that there would be 14 feathers on the left side before the little feathers on the right would thought to set themselves up to have the rule, which would take you right to Obama. And then the first little feather on the right side, there it is in bold. There was one set up, but shortly it appeared no more. How can Trump be a short feather if he legitimately lost the election? He would be a long feather. There were multiple examples of long feathers that only served one term and lost the election in their second term. That's when it was legitimate. Here, Ezra is saying that he's a short feather. So there's one of two scenarios that I see. He will either be assassinated in the next month. I don't know about that, maybe. Or he will miraculously get his second term and then become a short feather. That's what I'm banking on, but time will tell. Are there scriptural timeline examples that support this that we've gone through before? There are. The first one is with Uzziah in the Bible. Multiple similarities here between Uzziah and Trump. One of my favorite is that he built towers, Trump Tower. He kind of went to war against the evil Philistines on the West Coast. Trump's already done that with Seattle and Portland to a degree. I think it's going to happen to a greater degree in days to come. And there was a great earthquake during Uzziah's time. Is that a hint at an earthquake coming for us? The Wasatch Wake Up, we shall see. And here's that. You remember that from my first one. Here's a little blurb on that earthquake that follows the half hour of silence. It says that another angel comes, stands at the altar with a golden censer, and he has given much incense that he offers up with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar. And then that smoke of the incense, those prayers of the saints, they all ascend up before God out of the angel's hand. And then the angel takes the censer with all those prayers, fills it with fire of the altar, and casts it into the earth. And then comes this earthquake. This is the earthquake that follows the half hour of silence. It hasn't happened yet, but I believe the half hour of silence is or has ended. We are basically there. Now, this earthquake, we've talked about it being at the Wasatch Wake Up. Where's it going to be? Doctrine and Covenants, he says, upon my house it shall begin, and from my house it shall go forth. That's where you can expect this to all start, and I think it's coming really soon. So this angel that offers up the incense of all the prayers of the saints, did that just happen? It could have. This was an idea someone brought up in a group I follow, that here on 11/20 of 2020, the prophet's 11-minute message was given at 11 a.m. That's 3 11s, 11th hour. Whoa. And he was actually told when and how to give this message by inspiration, which is pretty amazing. It's a great message. I encourage everyone to go and read it and ponder it. But basically, he talks about giving gratitude no matter what's going on. It doesn't spare us from sorrow, sadness, grief, and pain. Right after that, he talks about his wife and children passing. But it can soothe our feelings, give us greater perspective on the very purpose and joy of life. He also gives the example of Christ giving thanks before he raised the dead and multiplied loaves and fishes. Is this something we're going to need in the days to come? Perhaps. And then he invites everyone to flood the earth with gratitude and prayers. That sounds a lot like taking the censer and filling it with the fire of the altar and casting it into the earth. this may have just happened. We may have just seen Revelation chapter 8, the first few verses happen. And here's his prayer. It was grateful for life and all that sustains life, relief from the two things that are challenging life right now, COVID and the political strife that we are in, and a prayer of healing and unity. And then he basically prayed to help us overcome our weakness. Remember in Ether 12, if we can identify our weakness and come to the Lord with it, he will make weak things become strong. This is what he's talking about. Help us repent from selfishness, unkindness, pride, and prejudice of any kind. And this is what he's hoping that we receive in return, that we can better serve and love one another as brothers and sisters. Being made strong. This is pretty amazing. And like I said, he was told when to give it. He was given specific details, when, how, and what he should say. That is amazing. Basically, I think the key takeaway that came out of his message was here. He said, I have concluded that counting our blessings is far better than recounting our problems. No matter our situation, showing gratitude for our privileges is a unique, fast-acting, long-lasting spiritual prescription. Simply stated, in everything, give thanks, even the bad things. It's an echo of a message that he gave back in 2016. He said basically the same thing. Gave us a principle that is key to our spiritual survival. That's something we're going to need. It is this principle that will only become more important as the tragedies and travesties around us increase. Here we are. It's already happening. And then he goes through a story of a bunch of saints that have been kicked out of their homes, and they're in this little cold log cabin roasting potatoes in the snow. And one of the saints said, that was a very joyous night. And he said, that's it. That's the key. This key to our spiritual survival. Saints can be happy under every circumstance. We can feel joy even when having a bad day, a bad week. Here we are, even a bad year. Man, was that prophetic. If we've had a bad year this last year, and just wait till next year. All right, moving on to some other scriptural examples. We have two from the Book of Mormon that we've talked about before. The first one being Moroni in the Book of Alma. You have this kind of story of the Zoramite dissenters going to their dark-skinned Lamanite brothers, and they kind of rise up in rebellion. And what do they go against? The armed forces, which would be Moroni, and the religious Christian leaders of the day, Alma. But man, that sounds a lot like Antifa and BLM attacking our police forces and against our Christian ideals. And eventually the military forces under Captain Moroni are successful. They put it down. There's a short-lived peace. And you have this little blurb here in chapter 45 where Alma prophesies of the eventual downfall 400 years from the time Christ shall manifest himself. There's that 400 years. That's important. 400 years ago, the Mayflower landed. Exactly. So, And then comes a political war after this little Zoramite dissension. You have Amalickiah, who wants to be king, and he raises up in rebellion, basically, against the government. If you were to change this to our day, you'd have something like this. And the secret combination, the three-headed eagle, was desirous to set up a king. And those people who were wroth, we're seeing a lot of wroth people out there, they were also desirous to establish a king, and they were, the greater part of them, the lower judges of the land, seeking for power. And they had been led by the flatteries of this secret combination that if they would support them and establish them to be their king and their rulers, and that they, the secret combination, would make them rulers over the people. That sounds a lot like communism. The few, the elite, ruling over the weak. And we see that the secret combination, because they were men of cunning devices and many flattering words, that they led away the hearts of many people to do wickedly. yea, and to seek to destroy the church of God, and to destroy the foundation of liberty, which God had granted unto them, or which blessing God had sent upon the face of the land for the righteous' sake. That sounds a lot like what we're going through. And then, you have Captain Moroni, or Captain Trump here, which I believe this is representing, who was the chief commander of the armies of the Nephites. When he heard about these dissensions, he was angry. He rents his coat. He focuses on our memory of God, religion, freedom, peace, our wives, and our children. And he fastened it upon the end of the pole. He bows down. He prays that the Lord will bless them so long as there is a band of Christians to possess the land. And the people came running together with their armor girded about their loins. They were ready to fight. And this is basically where we're at. He went forth in the land where the dissensions were, gathered together all the people that were for him, and then Amalickiah, this secret combination, saw that the people of Moroni, the patriots, were more numerous than the Amalickiahites, and they also saw that his people were doubtful concerning the justice of the cause in which they had undertaken. Yeah, there's quite a few people that, the rats are scurrying from the sinking boat that are singing like canaries right now. And we will see more of that to come. Therefore, fearing that he should not gain the point, he took those of his people who would and departed into the land of Nephi. And then Moroni basically heads them off. Many are taken and tried and killed for treason, but the leaders, Amalickiah, actually get away. This is very interesting. This matches basically what I saw in this dream. I've shared it before once or twice. Basically, Trump had a posse. They were cowboys. They went up on this mesa. There was another band of bad guys that were chasing him up the hill, and he waited till kind of the last second, gave the order, and they all charged down the hill and took out this band of people that were following after him. But it starts a landslide. Those people that get away, the leaders, and they're up on the mesa. They start a landslide that takes Trump away, and I think that's going to happen. I really do. This was probably the most inspired dream I've ever had. So we shall see. And then it goes on, what happens after that. Amalickiah gets this coalition of the dissenters and the Lamanites to invade the land. That would be Russia and China for us. Moroni could have kept them off if it wasn't for the civil war happening in the heart of the land with the kingmen who join in alliance with the invaders. What kind of civil war could that be for us? So just to recap, you have the Zoramite rebellion with Lamanite support. That would be Antifa, BLM. The attempted coup of the government, which is what's going on right now. They were overcome by patriots and freedom lovers of the land. We are getting there. Many traitors are tried and condemned. That would be that dream where Trump goes after his pursuers, and there are reports of thousands of litigations that are going to happen for people. We shall see, though. And then the leaders get away. They conspire against the Nephites, and then there's a civil war with the kingmen that weakens the nation, allowing the coalition of dissenters and Lamanites to gain ground that are eventually dispersed with divine help from the 2,000 stripling warriors. That sounds a lot like what we are either going through currently or about to go through. So, is there a second witness? God always says in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Here we are in the Book of Mormon that follows immediately on the heels of the war chapters, with Pahoran being Trump now. Let's see how this plays out. So in the commencement of the 40th year, there was a serious difficulty. Pahoran, the chief judge, had died, and there was contention who would be the new chief judge. And it came to pass that Pahoran Jr. was appointed by the voice of the people to be the chief judge and a governor over the people of Nephi. And it came to pass that Bacumanai, when he saw that he could not obtain the judgment seat, he did unite with the voice of the people. So you have the people uniting under Pahoran, who was the appointed chief. Some people think, oh, Pahoran is Biden, and Trump here would be Payankai, that was exceedingly wroth, wanting to flatter away people to rise up in rebellion. No. Trump is against the deep state. Payankai here and his people, his followers, you can see here with Kishkumen, once he is taken, Kishkumen and the rest of the deep state, or the secret combination, they rise up and they kill Pahoran. That sounds like a short feather coming for our dear friend Donald Trump. He's a good patriot. And then, just like before, they try to pursue Kishkumen, and he gets away. Just to come back later. So Kishkumen and Gadianton, they're banned. They continue to work in the background, seeking to overthrow the government. Then there's this first strike on the capital city by the coalition of the Lamanites and the dissenters. That ends up taking out the next judge. Initially they are fought off, but they regroup and take over most of the land. There's this focus on spiritual awakening and conversion with Nephi and Lehi, and their subsequent obtaining a priesthood power. That's something we've talked about a lot with the coming awakening that I believe is going to happen next May, the day of Pentecost, our own day of Pentecost. There's the conversion of the invaders subsequently, and then the Gadianton robbers take over the government. There's subsequent war with the Gadiantons that is only successful by banding together in a spirit of Zion until the Antichrist comes and basically takes out the government, and the tribes have to unite against him, which would be symbolic of the lost 10 tribes coming to help us. Here is just how each of the feathers match up perfectly from the book of Helaman through 3rd Nephi with each of the chief judges. I think that's pretty impressive. So that concludes some of the scriptural evidence why I believe this is going to be reversed, and Trump is going to still get a second term and then become a short feather, and on to basically what we are dealing with right now, like what is really happening out there. Why is this happening? So basically, I believe that everything is going according to plan, both for the Lord and also, what the bad guys are thinking. This all kind of boils down to a cold proxy war with communism, and don't roll your eyes at that. If you don't think we are in a Cold War with communism still, then hopefully I can change your mind with some of these examples. This is something that we've been fighting for 100 years, but also since the beginning of time. Communism is basically Satan's counterfeit to consecration. It is a continuation of the war in heaven here on earth. It's basically the forcing of people to take care of people, the forcing of charity, which is basically a corrupt, devilish way to go about it. This is a quote from Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, and David O. McKay. Communism and all other similar isms bear no relationship whatsoever to the United Order. They are merely the clumsy counterfeits which Satan always devises of the gospel plan. Latter-day Saints cannot be true to their faith and lend aid, encouragement, or sympathy to any of these false philosophies. It will prove snares to their feet. And here from Ezra Taft Benson, no true Latter-day Saint can be a communist or a socialist, because communist principles run counter to the revealed Word of God. Ouch. It's kind of bold. Here he is again. To have been on the wrong side of the freedom issue during the war in heaven meant eternal damnation. How then can Latter-day Saints expect to be on the wrong side in this life and escape the eternal consequences? The war in heaven is raging on earth today. The issues are the same. Shall men be compelled to do what others claim is for their best welfare, or will they heed the counsel of the prophet and preserve their freedom? Wow. So communism versus socialism, is it really the same, or are they different? This is again from Benson, who was staunchly against communism. He said, "We must ever keep in mind that collectivized socialism is part of the communist strategy. Communism is fundamentally socialism. We will never win or fight against communism by making concessions to socialism. Communism and socialism, closely related, must be defeated on principle. The close relationship between socialism and communism is clearly pointed out by Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina in a letter to the editor of the Washington Post of August 6, 1961. He said, both socialism and communism derive from the teachings of Marx." The leaders of BLM said that they were trained Marxists. Interesting. "And Engels. In fact, the movements were one until the split over methods of approach which resulted after the Russian Revolution in 1905. The aim and purpose of both was then and is now world socialism, which communism seeks to achieve through revolution, and which socialists seek to achieve through evolution." I thought that was fairly profound. Socialism is much more kind of the turning up of the water, boiling the frog. Communism is straight up smacking that frog, I guess. But one might argue socialism, at least to a degree, is needed in today's world. This is from Howard W. Hunter, who said, "If man will not recognize the inequalities around him and voluntarily, through the gospel plan, come to the aid of his brother," which we, of course, are commanded to do, "he will find that through a democratic process he will be forced to come to the aid of his brother, and the government will take from the haves and give to the have-nots. Both have lost their freedom." I would say then, those who have lost their freedom to give voluntarily of their own free will and in the way they desire. Those who have not lost their freedom because they did not earn what they received. They got something for nothing, and they will neither appreciate the gift nor the giver of the gift. Under this climate, people gradually become blind to what has happened and the vital freedoms which they have lost. So basically, if we are to argue that these socialist programs are needed in today's world, it's because those that have become wicked and worldly and greedy, which, yes, I would say that has happened, but also it is damaging those that receive. It is creating a world of entitlement, a world of laziness, and we are seeing that as well. So we are in a world of hurt, that these communist and socialist programs and ideals are taking root. It indicates the degeneracy of the nation. These are 45 communist goals as presented by Cleon Skousen in his book The Naked Communist back in the 1960s. And if you don't think communism and socialism are taking root in America, then just read some of these. Discredit the American Constitution, call it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step. Yeah, that's been this year. Discredit the American Founding Fathers. Infiltrate the churches, replace revealed religion with social religion, discredit the Bible. This is all stuff that's happening. Eliminate prayer out of schools on the ground it violates principle of separation of church and state. That's been argued for a long time. Belittle all forms of traditional American culture. Creates the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition. We saw a lot of that this summer. discredit the family as an institution. That's BLM, working for that. Emphasize the need to raise children away from negative influence of parents. Yeah, give them to the state. Free trade with all nations, no tariffs. See, Trump's fighting against these things. Foreign trade to all countries, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind, do away with loyalty oath in Congress, capture one of the U.S. political parties or both. Yep. Use the courts to weaken American institutions, foment racial conflict. Wow. It's like this year has progressed these goals more than anything that I've seen. You know, indoctrinating students. That's why many of the college kids coming out are so staunch for socialism. You know, they want to get rid of student debt. They want everyone else to pay for it. This is the entitlement society that the left is trying to grow. Anyway, you can read some of these others. Violate freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And this just kind of makes you mad. This is all going on. So, the initial plan was to grow that slowly through socialism. Now they're kind of, I believe, on a new plan. So everything was going according to plan. We had Obamacare, skyrocketing national debt. We just needed Hillary to come in and wrap it all up. But then Trump happened. This was an outsider, someone that could not be bought. He said from the get-go he was on a mission to drain the swamp. He's been likened unto Cyrus of old, who restored the Jews to their homeland, as Trump has in our day. This is the reason from day one there's been so much opposition. We've had the Russian collusion with the fake dossier, the Ukraine call that led to this wonderful impeachment that didn't go over. That was immediately followed, like the same month, with the outbreak of COVID. I'm not going to say too much about that, but that seems like a very suspicious timing. And then we had race riots that followed on the heels of that. So, despite it all, unfortunately for them, it seemed like his popularity and base was growing. Trump did better in the election with minorities, blacks, Asians, Latinos. His numbers went up compared to past Republican presidential candidates. So, and on top of that, he had more votes than any other presidential candidate in the world, or ever in the history of America, except for Biden, of course. So I believe that the secret combination that's above us, as people were awakening to the sense of our awful situation, they realized that it was slipping away, and they were backed up against a wall, and that's when you're most dangerous. They follow the Fabian motto, when I strike hard. So this is what I believe is the plan. It's time to go for broke. Here's a theory that I'm putting out. So if I was a good communist, and I wanted to weaken or depopulate America, I would steal the election for Biden, no matter how obvious it may look. I'd crown him president-elect by the media, and I'd really make it seem like it's a done deal. I would even, increase the economy. Let's make that Dow break 30,000. Things are on the up and up. So what happens with that? Either, one, we get away with it and go back to our socialism by evolution, our plan A. And as we saw from the example, thanks to COVID, we are way ahead of schedule, despite everything Trump's done. COVID has really set us back. And if that doesn't work, go to 2. If it's prosecuted and flipped back to Trump, then we'll make him out to be a fascist dictator that's stealing the election, using said media, and stir up our base. And then we can crash the economy. That didn't happen before the election, surprisingly. But now I think I understand why. And then we can blame it all on Trump. Then we assassinate him and stir up the right as well. Now both sides are more prone to violence, and we will have our civil war. Then we can have communism by revolution, or Plan B. Either way, we win, and then China and Russia can move in and take over. That sounds pretty sinister, but pretty smart if you were a communist. So surprisingly, it seems like Plan A is back on track. It seemed so obvious, with everything that happened, that every legal case is being shot down, and even, this Texas one, there's been thousands of affidavits and testimonies, there's been voting irregularities, there's been evidence with this voting software. It's all been ignored or brushed aside. There's a little momentum here and there. There's still some cases moving up to the Supreme Court. There's the FBI Hunter Biden investigation for his tax fraud. Don't know why that had to wait till after the election, but oh well. But all in all, it is looking like it will truly take a miracle to reverse their election. I believe that Trump and the Republicans, or man in general, is approaching the all-he-can-do point. And the arm of flesh is weak, and it's time to rely on the arm of the Lord. And that's just the way the Lord likes it. This is where he wants to get us. So let's talk about what's coming up and how we are getting to that. First, December 10th, we just had Hanukkah. That's when it starts, and it goes for 8 days. It actually ends on the 18th. That's an interesting date to remember that. Hanukkah is the Festival of Lights. It's a celebration of the rededication of the temple. It's interesting that there are some temples reopening the very next Monday on the 21st. It is a daily lighting of 8 candles in succession. You start with the center one that gives light to the others. It grows progressively in light and power. It's all very symbolic of new beginnings, this growth and kind of a new awakening. So that's coming at an interesting time. Trump even put out a official kind of letter to observers of Hanukkah. He said, "This year's observance of the Festival of Lights comes at a time when the unbreakable bond between the United States and Israel has never been stronger. Over the past 4 years, my administration has stood in unwavering solidarity with the Jewish people. In recent months, we brokered historic peace deals between Israel and major Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan, ushering in unprecedented opportunities for enhancing stability and prosperity in the region." Well, that all sounds good, except for 1 Thessalonians 5:3, where it says, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." I think that is what was being talked about there. So, as our Jewish comrades are focusing on growing in light and power through Hanukkah, our Christian comrades, even today, are turning to prayer. This just happened in our capital city, the Jericho March, a national day of prayer, fasting. Basically, they are tapping into the covenant of the land, which is very interesting. And it's interesting that it's called the Jericho March. We all know what happened to Jericho after 7 days of marching, praying, blowing their shofars, and the walls all fall down. And when would 7 days later, after the 12th, after today? Well, it would be December 18th. Interesting. So Hanukkah started on the 10th, and it ends on the 18th. This was the 12th. Actually ends on the 19th, but pretty close, near the 18th there. So So there's a lot kind of pointing to that. And then you've got the 14th, 2 days later. So you have the 10th, the 12th, the 14th. You've got the peak of the Germanid meteor shower, said to be the best meteor shower of the year. And if you believe in the fifth angel starting the 5-month war that we're supposedly on the cusp of, then we have to have angels 1 and 2, which would be the asteroid, and 3 and 4, which would perhaps be nuclear or something or other. So there's the 14th, a great meteor shower coming. That could be a possibility. And it's also the day for the Electoral College to convene and vote for a new president. So we might be seeing some political and celestial fireworks that day. And then it also happens to be, this is all on the same day, the eclipse. December 14th is the midpoint of the 2 American eclipses. They are exactly 1,211 days apart, or 42 new moons. There's that 42. And I think both of those numbers are symbolic. If you take that 11 days and break it up into 2 parts, you've had 12 hours till his first coming, and there's 12 hours till the second coming for a 24-hour total. Well, we are in the 11th hour. I just think that's interesting that it's 12:11. Seemed like a random number, but there might be some divine signature there. Then, of course, the 42 new moons, symbolic of 42 months or 3.5 years of tribulations, which I believe we are on the cusp of. And here's some scriptures from Revelation that talk about 42 or times and half a time. Here with the woman being given the wings of an eagle to fly into the wilderness. And here it follows up after that. The Antichrist is given 40 and 2 months to basically fight against the covenant people. And at the same time, the 2 witnesses are going to prophesy 1,203 score days. It all kind of matches up with that 42. And just to remember the eclipses of the last days, you've got basically the one that we've had on August 21st, 2017, the one that's coming up in a day or two here, December 14th, that's basically underlining the crossing out of America here. That looks a lot like Tav, the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And they're all 42 new moons apart. They're all exactly 1,211 days apart. It's followed up by the 3 over here in the Old World that both cross out right over the Red Sea and underline it as well. That seems like certainly a divine signature there. And then we have this, something I talked about in one of my other videos, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction coming up here. Jupiter representing the king planet, or Christ. Saturn has rings like a sickle, but it can also represent Satan. This will be their closest conjunction since 1623. And 1620 is when the Mayflower landed, so 400 years there. And it's right on the winter solstice when things begin to get brighter. So we're going to talk a little bit about these things. I've done a little more research on it. This is an interesting scripture where he talks about how because all flesh is corrupted before him, the powers of darkness prevail on the earth and causes silence to reign. Well, we just had a half hour of silence, and the angels are waiting, the great commanded, to reap down the earth and gather the tares that they may be burned. The enemy is combined. So we are right there. We're going to talk a little bit about this. So first, let's talk about it happening on the winter solstice and how it relates to the Tav Everything before the 21st is basically getting darker, day by day, less and less light. It's kind of like looking worse and worse and worse for Trump, that sort of thing. And then afterward, like the gradual rising of the sun, everything is getting brighter. So there is this kind of narrowing, and there's an inflection point, and then things reverse and go out the other way. The Tav is very interesting. It has gone through a few different renditions. I think they're all meaningful. Like if you take the conjunction of the right to left, darkness to light, with the winter solstice, on the very day that Jupiter and Saturn are coming together, kind of from an up to down motion, you have a cross. Left to right, up to down. It's pretty interesting. That is the same as the Tav in the early Hebrew alphabet. But then in the middle, it became a cross, and it's changed a little today, but we're going to focus on, or an X. We're going to focus on the X. The Tav is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and they give them each a numerical weight. The Tav has the most at 400. There's that 400, the Mayflower landing 400 years ago. Signifies the end of the alphabet. Does it signify the end of America too? The Tav also means a mark or a seal or a sign. So when we read here in Revelations, it talks about here in the sixth seal, the four angels that want to reap down the earth, but then another angel comes and says, I've got the seal of the living God, and hurt not the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And then here we are now in the seventh seal with the sixth angel, where these four angels are being loosed, the ones that were held in reserve until the people were sealed in their foreheads. Well, sometime between the seventh seal, half-hour silence, and this sixth angel sounding, the people need to have had the seal of God on their foreheads. And here we are with the fifth angel, which would be the 5 months simple war that's happening soon, I believe. John sees a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit, and out comes smoke and locusts that devoured the land. It sounds a lot like the riots and looting, and kind of basically just everyone grabbing what they can in a desperate civil war here. But they are commanded not to hurt those that have the seal of God in their foreheads. And if we don't have that seal, that Tav, in our foreheads, now is the time to get it. The great Tav in heaven is coming next week, and we're gonna talk about that here. First, another example from Ezekiel 9. This is a little vision that Ezekiel had, where he saw 6 men that each had a slaughter weapon in his hand, and then there was one that came clothed with linen and a rider's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord calls the man clothed with linen and the rider's inkhorn, and says unto him, go forth to Jerusalem and mark. And the actual Hebrewic word there is the Tav. So set a mark, or set the Tav, upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, go after him through the city. He's talking now to the 6 with the slaughter weapons, and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Is that upon my house reference there? So that sounds a lot like don't hurt anyone that has the seal of God in their foreheads here that John saw with the fifth angel during this coming civil war. So how are we going to be protected during the war? We have to have the seal of God in our foreheads. The destroying angel, this is like the day or the Passover. If we can have that seal in our foreheads, we will be protected. And what exactly is that seal? We talked about this, that it's the name of the Father, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. This is the 144,000 that we want to become. They shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. Here we are in D and C. Where do we get that name? This is Joseph praying at the dedication of the Kirtland Temple. We ask thee, Holy Father, that thy servants may go forth from this house armed with thy power, and that thy name may be upon them, and thy glory be round about them, and thine angels to have charge over them. So we get the name of God written upon us, that Tav, in our forehead, in the temple. But it's conditional, and it's only sealed upon us during our calling election, made sure. This is something I shared from before, but basically the more sure word of prophecy means a man knowing that he is sealed unto eternal life. Bruce R. McConkie, those members of the church who devote themselves wholly to righteousness, living by every word that proceedeth forth from the mouth of God, will make their calling election sure, that is, they receive the more sure word of prophecy, which means that the Lord seals their exaltation upon them while they are yet in this life. So, let's get back to this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Now that we've kind of talked about the Tav, that'll be important in a second here. So, before, let's go back here. When I shared this before, I indicated this little sign here. I'm like, oh, it looks like a 21 but reversed. I'm like, that's kind of cool. It's a cross and a sickle. I had no idea what that thing was, so sorry to any astronomers out there or astrologers that actually kind of knew what that was. It's actually the sign of Saturn. You can see here that it has this kind of cross and then the sickle that comes down from it. But interestingly enough, Jupiter has the same kind of thing, but it's basically a mirror image and reversed. It's got a sickle first and then an upside down cross. Almost looks like a chiasmus. So here with Jupiter, you have the sickle and then an upside down cross, and then with Saturn you have a right side up cross and a sickle. Well, that's really interesting. And as I studied about this, I found a lot of symbology there. I'm not into astronomy really at all. This is all something I've been studying tonight. So if you look at the Jupiter and Saturn symbology, if you flip either one upside down, this one has Jupiter flipped upside down, you can see that they are basically mirror images and flipped from one another. So you couldn't get any more similar, but then also any more opposite from one another. That sounds a lot like, communism versus the law of consecration. Satan's plan versus Christ's plan. They're similar. They, we're kind of working towards the same end, but they have a different way of getting there. So let's talk about Jupiter and Saturn here, and these symbols for Jupiter and Saturn. So Jupiter would be represented by Christ, Saturn by Satan. Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius, the constellation Sagittarius, which is a centaur or an archer, which is interesting. He is half man, half beast. You think about Christ being above all, but then also became below all. he was both the most righteous, but then through taking on our sins became the most wicked and most vile. It's kind of the yin and the yang there. So that is really interesting that Jupiter rules over Sagittarius, which kind of has that yin and yang feel. Sagittarius also is said to, as an archer, he never misses his mark. So he is associated with prophecy, which is pretty interesting. And also the conjunction that's happening on the 21st actually is within Sagittarius. So it's kind of like saying, that this coming conjunction, the left to the right, the good and the bad, is on Christ's term. It's on his playing field, which is interesting. I also found this, that the sun transits this sign between approximately November 23rd and here we are, December 21st. There's that same date. Pretty interesting. Sagittarius is also thought to be a healer, and whose higher intelligence forms a bridge between earth and heaven. So that all seems very in line with Christ. Jupiter is also the ruling planet over Pisces, the fish. Think about the Jesus fish, which is interesting. Now look at the sign. The cross is inverted. I take that as it's been beaten, it's been overcome. Christ says that he has overcome the world. So the cross is inverted with him, and the crescent above the cross, the sickle that is raised up, is a symbol of warning, yes, but also mercy. It's raised, but it's not reaping. It's giving time. It's allowing the people to come to him instead of he come to them in wrath and reaping. It is a symbol of hope and optimism, of being reborn or newly born, kind of like the sunrise versus the sunset. And as Jupiter represents Christ, it can also represent the followers of Christ, those on his right hand. We're going to get to that. Now, over here to Saturn, it is represented by Satan. It is the ruling planet of Capricorn, which is the horned goat. So there you go. Satanism and the worship of the image of the horned goat. It's also the ruling planet over Aquarius, which deals with water. And we know from the D&C that Satan will have power over the water. Very interesting. And his cross is raised up. He is all about crucifying the Savior and anyone that stands for him. And then the crescent is below the cross, which is already out taking and reaping lives. He is about death and decay, like the setting of the sun. And as it represents Satan, it represents the followers of Satan on Christ's left hand. Very, very interesting. I really hadn't gotten into astrology very much in the past, but I think there are some interesting things to learn here, as we will see right here. If you flip those, Saturn on the one side and Jupiter on the other, do you see anything there? Well, with the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter happening on December 21st, I see pretty obvious 21 there with Jupiter. What about Saturn? Maybe if we modify it a little. That looks a lot like a 12 now in Saturn, with Jupiter being 21. 12, 21, Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn on the left, Jupiter on the right, coming together on the exact day that Saturn and Jupiter are coming together. Here it is on the left, with Jupiter on the right, coming together. And we are just about 2 lines up there. We are right close to when they actually do come together. So if you look here with Saturn, he is already reaping on the left. He's having his day. Jupiter on the right, calling for peace and mercy. They are coming together on the very day that their astronomical symbols represent 1, 2, 2, 1, which is also a chiasmus. Interesting. And if you flip the image, which is what's going to happen as Jupiter and Saturn come into conjunction, as they collide, basically, and then they separate from one another, and it would be a reversed image, or a flipped 180-degree image, with Jupiter continuing on its path, Saturn continuing down from left to right. Now, you flip the images, you also have an interesting finding. Now, it's Christ, symbolized by the cross, with the sickle that has flipped, and now he's reaping. And Satan, he has flipped on his head, and it's like a snake here, or putting his hands up. You know, the wicked are gonna put their hands up and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe what happened. Very interesting, all on 12/21. So the great conjunction of the last days. I think this sign is profound, and it has a lot of meaning for what's coming. This is symbolic of the Tav. You can see the X there that it makes, which is weighted at 400 years from the Mayflower landing till right now when this sign is being given. The Tav is the end of the Hebrew alphabet, which could signal the both birth of America, the last time it was given in 1623, and the sign that signals her death. It's interesting that there's also a chiasmus here. It took basically 3 years from the landing of the Mayflower till the sign, from 1600 to 1623, and it'll take about 3 years, the 3.5 years from the sign of the death that's happening right now, till the actual death of America and the birth of Zion. So there's another chiasmus there. This great sign in the heaven is the same mark talked about in Revelation, as well as Ezekiel 9. This is important. It is not a coincidence. It's not a celestial treat. It is a countdown. It is a timer. If you look, it is an hourglass, as Saturn is coming closer and closer into colliding with Jupiter, as the followers of Saturn, is coming closer and closer into colliding with the followers of Jupiter. And once they collide here on the 21st, they will move away from one another. They will become more and more polarized. The right will be gathered into their bundles, the wheat, and the left will be gathered into their bundles, the tares. This is extremely symbolic. I can't emphasize that enough. This all came to me. It's not anything that I'm proficient at or strong in understanding, but basically I learned a ton about this as I studied it. And there's probably some great astrologers and astronomers out there that can do a much better job. I'd be interested to hear from them. So it's basically like a week of Tavs. You have the December 14th eclipse that is highlighting the Tav that eventually comes at the end of the 3.5 years, April 8th, 2024. And that creates a Tav over America, signifying the end of America. And then you have the other tav that is in a vertical pattern here on the 21st. So you have the horizontal on the left, the vertical on the right, with the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. But what if you made another tav between the two? Like an X marks the spot sort of thing, right in the middle. What is in the middle of that week? Well, it's December 18th. And to quote my favorite Indiana Jones, X marks the spot. So, December 18th, that same day that Hanukkah ends on, that the Jericho March that started today on the 12th would be ending on or nearby. Very interesting what the 18th is. So we've talked about the 18th, but to get some background, we'll just kind of revisit that. To understand this, you have to understand the Daniel days that I've talked about. Here in Daniel 9:27, he, Christ, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's 7 years from the beginning of the eclipse, which was followed by the Revelation 12 sign, which was followed by President Nelson becoming prophet and having their own miraculous witness that Wendy talked about, and ending with the subsequent eclipse in April of 2024. And in the midst of the week, so that would be in the middle of the 7 years, at 3.5 years, which would be right now, 2020, but also you can think of it now as in the midst of the week of Tavs, the midst of this coming week. Another indication, another layer pointing to the 18th. He shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And as we've talked about before, the sacrifice is not from our temples. It represents the sacrifice of Christ that the Israelites used to do on a daily basis. That is symbolic of our sacrament that we have now. So I would still postulate that the sacrifice and the oblation to cease is the canceling of church, of something happening that precludes us from going to church and partaking of the daily sacrifice or the sacrament. So we will know shortly enough, I guess. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. So there's 7 years between the eclipses. In the midst of the 7 years, December 14th, there's another eclipse. That's another bad sign. And that very same week, in the midst of that week, between the 14th and the 21st, we have the 18th, when he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now, if you go into Daniel a little further, you find that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the subsequent abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And you will be blessed if you wait and come to the 1,305 and 30 days, so 45 days later. We're going to talk about that. Daniel 8:14, he adds one more date for the host to be trodden underfoot, 2,300 days. I take that as when the Antichrist will be basically taken out, 2,300 days after the daily sacrifice is taken away on the 18th. And we've talked about this in my Isaiah video, but I just think it's amazing, so we'll revisit. So the 21st being the sign of the coming harvest and reaping, the wheat and the tares. Then this daily sacrifice should probably be around that time. and the start of the 5-month war, because 5 months later from now will be 5/23/21, the day of Pentecost, which I'm hoping and believing is that great awakening that we're all waiting for. So you start with December 18th, the taking of the daily sacrifice, add 1290 Daniel days, and you end up June 30th, 2024, which would be the abomination of desolation, where the Antichrist comes into the temple and desecrates it. And then August 13th, 2024, which would be 45, well, the 14th is 45 days later, to get you to the 1335 Daniel days from the taking of the daily sacrifice. You come to this blessed event, the coming of the city of Enoch and the lost 10 tribes, and the day of deliverance, which is the day after Tisha B'Av, which is the national Jewish fast for the temple being destroyed in Jerusalem on the exact same day, 665 days apart. And it just happens to be the day that the Antichrist would be at our very walls of the New Jerusalem, and we're praying and fasting for deliverance, turning our hearts to the promises made to our fathers, in particular Enoch, who was promised would come down and save his children when they look up, and they will look down, and we will fall upon their necks, and they will fall upon our necks, and we will kiss each other, which is the coming wedding day. It's just a few days later, Tu B'Av, August 19th, a holiday of love, like Valentine's Day. It's a great day for weddings, hint, hint. It starts the evening of Sunday the 18th, so as the sun goes down, the very next Sunday, after we have been delivered and we are rejoicing with those of the city of Enoch and the lost 10 tribes, at the stroke of midnight, the bridegroom comes to his bride, and all those that have been confirmed in the covenant through those 7 years that Daniel talks about, these are the wise virgins, those that have the symbol, the seal, the tav written in their foreheads. They are invited into the wedding feast. And it's exactly almost to the day 7 years from the first eclipse, which is amazing. So, and then if you follow it up and you add the 2,300 Daniel days to the same day of December 18th, you come to the days of the Jews' deliverance from the Antichrist at the Battle of Armageddon, when Christ comes a second time to the Jews on the exact same day that he came the first time, April 6th. But it'll be 2027 instead of, 81 or whenever the year was that he came the first time. So, isn't just God amazing with how he works with all this? I see so much divine signature all over the celestial bodies, aligning everything that's happening in our current political system and even in our own personal lives. I really believe in my heart of hearts that the election will have its own Tav moment where Trump flips to the top and Biden flips to the bottom. That is kind of what the Tav means to me. It's this swapping of something that looks to be going one way, but all of a sudden it's upside down, 180 degrees going the other. But that will take a miracle, and I believe if we as Christians care about our country, when you start praying for that miracle, fasting for it, doing everything we can to bring it about, and let Hanukkah, that started on the 10th through the 18th, and this week of the separate Tavs from the 14th to the 21st, be our time of refinement, our time to just give everything we can to seek for our own mark upon our foreheads, and to seek for that national mark of preservation upon this land that we so desperately stand in need of, that will only come after much trial and tribulation, as Doctrine and Covenants talks about the blessings coming. I really think that something big is about to happen this coming week, likely the 18th or the 21st, but be it as it may be sooner or later. But if nothing happens, I think I'm going to sign off. This may be my last one, and I'll just disappear into YouTube forgetfulness. But if not, we may have some of those great and terrible days on our doorstep. They will be great for the righteous, for those on the right, and those following Jupiter, the king planet, but they will be terrible when that flip happens for those on the left hand of the Lord, those that are following Satan or Saturn as is represented by this great conjunction that is happening, one of the greatest signs that I can think of in our day. This has been a lot of fun to research and study, and looking forward to any feedback, and I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.